Welcome back to another Big Sky Now. We got the weekly media panel, Mark Nelke from the Coeur d'Alene Press, Ian Bivona, the Columbia Basin Herald, and Fritz Neighbor of the Daily Interlake, holding it down. I'm Josh Dugan. We're back at it. Regular season's over for Big Sky football, so we're going to do a little kind of season recap and kind of look ahead to the playoffs. Before we move into all that, why don't we get to our performance of the week from last week? Mark, why don't you kick it off and we'll go around the circle.
Okay. Well, I kind of know what you guys are going to talk about, so I'm going to go way off the grid here and go Northern Arizona winning their season finale at Eastern and then cutting ties with their coach a day or two later. I thought that was kind of odd. Unless there's other things we don't know about. I was reading some stuff on him. He's a pretty good defensive coordinator at some other spots. Maybe that's somewhere where he wants to go, but it's like, I thought Arizona did pretty good. Weren't they the only team that beat Montana?
Yeah.
And you know, I guess it's like what do they expect as a program down there? I mean, they have some pretty good seasons, not great seasons, but not terrible seasons. So it'll be interesting to see, you know, what they do next. I thought they were kind of building on something this year, so we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, I texted Fritz yesterday. I was like, surprised they canned Chris Ball. They beat the Griz. Pretty much same things you were just saying, so I'm glad you brought that up, Mark. Definitely a kind of a head-scratcher. I know they haven't had the longevity there, but they definitely were building momentum. But how about you, Fritz? What about you for your performance of the week?
Well, I agree with Mark that that's a shocker. I thought it was probably Ball's best season as coach. So I didn't care for that very much. I guess I probably need to stick with the obvious and go with Clifton McDowell. He just keeps playing a little bit better every week, which is tough to do. Griz have won 7 in a row, and he was just about perfect on Saturday. I think he had 6 incompletions, 3 of them were throwaways, smart throwaways when he's on the run, and you know they'd blown up a screen play or whatever. 200 yards passing, 69 rushing, and just basically controlled things. And I know the Cats bemoaned their lack of tackling, but that guy's been tough to tackle all year, getting the extra yards, turning off some gash runs, refusing to be sacked very often. So I'll go with Cliff.
Well said, Fritz. And he plays within the offense. He doesn't force much. He kind of lets it come to him. A lot of credit to McDowell. And according to the Grizzlies website, he's a senior, but he does have an extra year of eligibility. That's what the website says. So if he's back for another year, that's big for the Griz for sure. Ian, how about you for performance of the week?
Yeah, it's a guy we've all been talking about a little bit over the last couple of weeks. UC Davis is Alan Larison, 174 total yards of offense and 4 total touchdowns. Scored all of UC Davis's touchdowns in that win, so going to go with him.
Well said. That dude's been an absolute monster. I'm going to kind of cheat on this one just a little. We had 3 rivalry games. I'm going to go with the 3 teams who took care of business in their rivalry games. Montana, UC Davis, and Idaho. All impressive wins. And rivalry games, college football, end of the year, you kind of throw the records away. You throw the stats away to prove it kind of a thing, and all 3 of those teams proved it. Quick shout-out to Vandals' backup QB, Jack Lane, who had 6 first-half touchdown passes, I believe. So that's kind of a heck of a game right there. So just overall, got to take care of business in the rivalry games, something to build on. And if you didn't make the playoffs for Davis, something to hold on to for next year. But these playoff teams, that's a good win. As far as Brawl the Wild, we've talked about it just a little bit. Kind of want to get your guys' reaction. Kind of a blowout game, 37-7. Did not see that score coming personally one bit. But Fritz, why don't we start with you and we'll go around just kind of any reaction there.
Well, it kind of reminded me of the last 2 games where the home team got momentum and just didn't give it back. There's a couple times where I thought MSU might make some noise. Malott had a 46-yard gash run, and then they went backwards and missed a goal in the first half. They had a pretty disastrous end of the first half where they thought they were going to get off a Hail Mary and eat up the last 5 seconds on the clock. Instead, took a huge sack and left a second on the clock, and then they wrote the kicker. And then they gave up a 33-yard field goal after that 15-yard penalty. So now they're down 20. Then they scored to start the second half. Then they gave up a kickoff return. And even after that, they had a heck of a time completing passes. But Malott put one right on time to Cola's hands that might have been a touchdown, would have been a huge game. And he dropped it. And I don't know, the Cats just weren't ready to play. And the other thing that sticks out with that is, Sean Chambers, I think, is one of the top 5, maybe one of the top 3 players in the whole conference. And in their 2 league losses, they just haven't played them. They got behind and they don't play them. And somebody finally broached that subject with Vegan on Monday, and he agreed. He said, "Yeah, we need to figure out a way to get him in the game more." So those are the things that really hung with me after that blowout loss.
Yeah, a lot of mistakes from Montana State, and the Chambers thing definitely jumped out at me as well. How about you, Ian?
Yeah, Fritz mentioned it a little bit, but just that huge start by the Montana offense, scoring 17 points on their first 3 drives, with a start for them in a big rivalry game like that, Big Sky title on the line and everything. The Montana defense as well, holding firm on all 4 of MSU's 4th down attempts. It's not even like they were crazy distance. I think one was 4th and 1, 2 of them were 4th and 5, and then one was 4th and 6 or 7. So shout out to them, just holding firm, not allowing them to continue their drives there. Is clearly a big part of the win.
Yeah, no, that's such a momentum changer when you stop a team going forward on 4th down. How about you, Mark?
Well, I think my initial reaction is I think Montana State just missed another tackle. I mean, they just I watched the first half last night just to kind of get ready for this and see how, I fell asleep at halftime. But the stuff I saw in the first half was like, I mean, man, there was one play that I saw they missed the tackle right after the handoff. Then he got outside and they missed. The next guy missed. The next guy missed. I must have missed like 6 tackles on one play. And it was like, good gosh, if you can't even tackle Montana, obviously you're not going to beat them. And then I was thinking, Fritz was talking about, and Josh, about Chambers. I was wondering about that. That's kind of tough when you have maybe your 2 best guys on the team are play the same position and it's both quarterbacks. So, and how do you get both of them on the field for more snaps? I don't. Maybe that's something they need to think about.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. That was kind of my biggest takeaway was the Sean Chambers thing. And, yeah, no, the Grizzlies do have some shifty guys, but they're not that shifty that they should be breaking every single tackle. The Bobcats were just flat out missing it. No, for sure. And, yeah, no, that was my big takeaway, just the lack of Sean Chambers. For his first appearance in the game was that play late in the first half Fritz mentioned. You throw the guy kind of into the fire there. 0 touches in the first half till the final play. Didn't see him much in the second half. He had 14 rushing touchdowns, 9 passing touchdowns heading into the game, and you barely see him. It's just kind of a head-scratcher. I've given a lot of praise to that coaching staff, but that's the first thing in a while I'm like, you got to get that guy involved. There's really no way of beating around the bush. He's too good not to. And for the Griz, just kind of, Ian mentioned it, but that defense is just makes stop after stop. Every time they need a big play, they make it. I feel like they can have the defense to make a run deep into the playoffs. That's a championship kind of defense. I think they could compete against a team like the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. It'll be a matter of getting there, but we'll talk about that more later. But it's hard to hold down the Bobcats offense, and they made them look pedestrian, and nobody's done that in a while. So that was pretty impressive. Idaho locked them down for half the game. Second half, Bobcats still got it rolling. This one, Montana just put it on them. So, no, that was impressive. Moving along, I did want to ask you guys, me and Fritz were talking about this one before the show. The Hornets, Sacramento State, they did get in the playoffs. They finished at 7-4. UC Davis got snubbed, in my opinion, but we're going to get your guys' opinions on that. At 7-4, they beat Sac State head-to-head 31-21. I did want to get your guys' opinions on that one because I was expecting Davis to be in, but hey, here we are. That's the name of the game. Mark, your thoughts on this one, and we'll go around.
Yeah, maybe somebody doesn't like Dan Hawkins or something like that. I don't know. That just seems kind of weird, but you look at their loss. They lost to Eastern. They lost to Northern Arizona. They beat Southern Utah and Weber. I guess they didn't play Montana State and Idaho, so those were 2 games at least they didn't have a chance to win, and maybe they got dinged for, not playing as tough a schedule where Sac State played all the 3 top teams. Of course, they lost to them, but, who knows?
Yeah, no, I like what you said. Maybe they just don't like Coach Hawkins. It's getting to that point. No, how about you, Fritz? I know we were talking about this one before.
Yeah, like I said before we got on air here, Ken Haslam, who's the U of M's athletic director and chair of the selection committee, he said it. The main reason was it was a lot tougher for Sac State to get 7 wins than it was for Davis. And my problem with that is that, yes, they beat Stanford, and yes, they played a tougher schedule, but I don't think there's any way they beat Stanford now. And Davis just handed it to him. I don't think that game was a 10-point game. I thought Larison was a force. Mm-hmm. I thought he should still be a force in the playoffs. He's a really good player, and I see that they don't get to showcase him for another game or 2. So, second year in a row for Davis, where I thought they should be in, and they weren't.
Yeah, it's a tough one for sure. How about you, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of all in agreement here. I don't really see how they got left off in terms of like the head-to-head game that we just saw last week. I guess I could see why the tougher schedule kind of makes a difference there. But I mean, to me, the head-to-head's kind of like that's the gold standard, you know. But it's a real shame. Like Fritz just mentioned, I was excited to see a little more Land Larison, but it is what it is.
Yeah, and they had all the momentum going in the right direction. Feels like Sac State hasn't really been rolling late. Aggies, one of their losses to the Griz, they lost by a touchdown, and they lost to Oregon State, who's a top 10 team in the FBS right now. So you kind of throw that one out the window. So it's tough. I think the Aggies should have made it. We're all in agreement. We don't got to go on and on, but just a little bit of a head scratcher. And like you guys said, with Larison playing out of his mind, he's the kind of guy you would have liked to see get the attention on a national stage and go out there and perform. So it's a rough one for sure. Let's move into Larison's a guy who was racking up some awards in the Big Sky Awards. Let's just talk, I want to say, your regular season awards. We can kind of roll through them one at a time, or if anybody wants to just go for them all at once, we'll start with you, Fritz, just kind of Big Sky MVP. We have offense and defense, coach of the year. I wanted to get your guys' game of the year. We'll kind of roll through it. What do you think? We just do one at a time and go through it all, or?
Sure. The Griz did pretty good. They have House Coach of the Year for the fourth time. Third guy, he's the third coach in Big Sky Conference history to do that. Clifton McDowell's the newcomer of the year. Eli Gilman's freshman of the year. And then the one I really liked was Alex Gubner being defensive player of the year. I'd like to see those D tackles, nose tackles get their props. I think it happens more in the Big Sky where they get selected as player of the year than it does in other leagues. He did not make the Buck Buchanan Award list of finalists, which got pared down to 22 recently, but he gets his props. He is a force, and I think every coach in this league knows it. And I think if they get out and host a couple more teams from outside the conference, a lot more people know it. He's a player. Number 99 is for the Griz. And as far as snubs, I thought Winston Reed could have been defensive MVP. He's a great safety for Weaver. Riley, our linebacker for the Griz, Riley
Wilson.
Blanking. Yeah. I thought he should have been first team. I thought Rylan Ort from the Bobcats should have been first team. He was a great player all season, and I think he might have just been honorable mention. So that's all I have to say about that. Mainly happy for Governor.
Yeah, no, there was so much talent across the conference right now. It's hard to argue. And I know what you said about interior linemen. You don't see them usually get the praise, but he's definitely one of the anchors of a top-tier defense, so you understand the award. How about you, Mark? Any other choices you would have had or anything jump out at you?
Not really. Maybe, Big Sky Coach of the Year. Usually Coach of the Year is somebody for a team that isn't very good that kind of surprises. And so in Houck's, in his situation, after a couple of weeks, we were wondering about Montana. Were they any good? Yeah. And then they end up winning the conference. So I guess, that he's certainly deserving of it from that respect. And then the only other thing I would say, you mentioned game of the year, and I was thinking it wasn't a classic, but it was a pretty good game. Turns out that Montana-Idaho game in the Kibbe Dome, Montana held on and won, and they ended up winning the conference. If Idaho had won the game in the playoff the rest of the way, they'd have won the conference. So that was my game of the year.
Yeah, that was my game of the year as well. I remember watching the broadcast, ESPN2 nationally televised game, Big Sky After Dark, and the announcer, Jorge Sedano, he said this is an instant classic, and that just stuck with me because it really was one of those games. If you're a Vandal or a Griz fan, Big Sky football fan, you won't forget about that one. Just an absolutely crazy game. McCoy was making some Patrick Mahomes-esque plays late to Hatton. Just an absolute firefight for sure. Griz did hang on, and like you said, kind of changed their whole season, helped them win that title. How about you, Ian? Just thoughts on the end of the season awards, or if you have any thing different than how the results came out and maybe your game of the year?
Yeah, I jotted down a list, and I was pretty much in agreement with the conference in terms of how it all came out. Only difference I had, and kind of an under-the-radar guy on defensive MVP, I'd written down Jack Kelly's one of my guys, a linebacker for Weber. He ended up getting that first-team nod. 34 tackles, 12 for loss, 9.5 sacks as a linebacker, 5 pass breakups, and 4 forced fumbles, which led the Big Sky. I think he's only like a redshirt sophomore. So he'll be a force to be reckoned with in the next coming years. But that's the only difference I really had. My game of the year is also going to be Idaho and Montana. I mean, that was just one heck of a game. A little bit sleeper under the radar game is that Eastern and Idaho State game when Idaho State ended up mounting that 27-point comeback in like 15 or 16 minutes of game time left. Obviously not like the nationally televised capturing everyone's eyes games, but that was a crazy game to watch. One that really stuck out to me this year.
Yeah, that was my honorable mention right there. And plus for Idaho State, you look back on the season, that's a big win when you look back for that program who's been up and down. You can at least have a couple big things to build on, and you look back on a comeback win like that, you don't forget about it. So, yeah, no, Big Sky Defensive Player of the Year, Governor, well-deserving. I was a little surprised Winston Reed didn't win it. He had 30 more tackles than anybody else in the conference, racked up some huge numbers, and Griez out of Montana State, he was up there too. 8.5 sacks, 43 total tackles, 12 tackles for loss. You watch Montana State play, you hear his name all game long, whether he's making a tackle or not, always creating havoc around the quarterback. So, like I mentioned with these end-of-the-year awards, Coach of the Year kind of felt like a lock after Montana turned it around. The rest of the conference, it was up in the air. Offensive MVP, we didn't even mention Hayden Hatton or McCoy or some of these guys. So there's so many different ways it could have gone. Land Larson, well-deserving, though, an absolute monster end of the year. So that was a fun one for sure. I will give a shout-out to Cody Hawkins. He might be my newcomer of the year just for changing that program around a little bit. Speaking of Montana State, we mentioned Griez. They lost Brawl Wild 37-7. That's a tough loss, of course. They're 8-3 on the year. All three of their losses are to top 10 teams on the road. They lost to number 1 South Dakota State, number 3 Montana, and number 9 Idaho at the Kibbe Dome. Tough place to play. I say all that because I do want to ask, do you guys think this Montana State team can bounce back and make a deep playoff run? They'll play the winners of Drake and North Dakota State. The Bison, I'm kind of expecting to come to Bozeman, so that could be a crazy one. So, Fritz, why don't we start with you and we'll go around.
Yeah, I think if you just know even your recent history, you think the Bobcats could do it because 2 years ago they lost decisively in Missoula. And at that point, when they did the selection show, the Bobcats were 1-1 against the field. They narrowly beat Eastern on the road, and they dropped the game by 19 at Washington Grizzly Stadium. And then they changed quarterbacks, and then they got hot. So that quarterback is still around, Tommy Moat. Sean Chambers is a force if he plays. I look forward to NDSU coming to Bobcat Stadium instead of the Bobcats having to go there. And we'll see what happens. I expect the Bobcats to be hanging around a while.
Yeah, that coaching staff, they're going to make some adjustments too. They got a heck of a staff, and they came out flat last week. They're going to be motivated. How about you, Ian?
Yeah, I think they'll be able to turn it around. You mentioned those losses to Idaho and South Dakota State. Those losses were by a combined 7 points on the road. Obviously, this tough one to Montana last weekend. I think they'll be able to shake that off and go on a pretty good run. Yeah,
when you say it like that, those are two games that if they're in Bozeman, you might be looking at different results for sure. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, well, like we talked about before, they need to tackle somebody this next game. Otherwise, it's going to be a short stint in the playoffs. Offensively, obviously, they have the two-headed quarterback, and they're great runners and stuff like that. But when they can't throw, then it's tough. And so if they can't throw and they have to rely on two running quarterbacks, that's a tough thing to do. But when they can open it up, when they played Eastern, they hit all those deep passes. Of course, everybody moved the ball against Eastern, so I didn't say anything. But if Montana State can do that, be a little more well-balanced, move the ball in the air too, as well as run it and tackle somebody, they could be around a while.
Yeah, no, it's hard to argue. They do have the formula of success. It just didn't show up last week. I got to agree. I am interested to see North Dakota State Bison. This was the most down year they've had in a while. You have to think going into the postseason, they're going to be very motivated. What better of a prove-it game to go beat Montana State with the nation's best home winning streak in Bozeman? So that's going to be a tough game. Kind of throw away the down year or whatever in the regular season from the Bison because they're going to show up in the playoffs. I think the winner of that game is going to be prepared to make a deep playoff run just because you win that one. That's a real test early in the postseason. So that'll be the big thing to watch. How do they do if they play the Bison? You don't know for sure, but it's leaning that way. And that's just the big question. Talking about Idaho, we've talked about them quite a bit, and they're going to face the winner of either Nicholls State or Southern Illinois at the Kibbe Dome. They got back on track, it looked like. Do you guys think they're back on track to make a solid playoff run after their blowout win over Idaho State? And just how far can the Vandals go? Why don't we start with you, Mark?
Well, it's no different. You know, they had Anthony Woods back, and they look a lot better when they have Anthony Woods in the backfield. And so I think what gives Idaho a good chance is their balance. They can run it with Woods. McCoy can throw it. Hatton can catch it. Jermaine Jackson can catch it. They don't have to rely on McCoy throwing it and running it and stuff like that. They have three different ways to beat you. So if you want to take one away, they have other ways to go. So I think that, and their defense is good too. So they're built to win this. It's just however it plays out.
Yeah, no, well said. I'm really looking forward to seeing Idaho in the postseason. How about you, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just what they needed at this time. A bit of a get-right game. I think they had put up 56 points but before halftime, 579 total yards of offense, and that defense, I think it was 4 passes they picked off too. I think it's kind of get the juices flowing right before the playoffs. I think they'll be able to go on a run.
Yeah, blow out your rival like that to end the season. That's a heck of a way to do it. How about you, Fritz?
Yeah, no, I think Idaho having a home game, that really helps. You know, last year they had to go on the road and lost right away. That's just loaded with talent. Backup quarterback comes in and throws for a bunch of yards and touchdowns. And Jermaine Jackson gets touchdown number 1. I couldn't believe that. He hasn't scored all year. I mean, that's a great threesome they have, great trio they have at the receiver. And I didn't realize he hadn't scored a touchdown all year until they played Idaho State. I think they're set up for at least one playoff win. You know, McCoy was a little nicked up, so they held him out. Should be healthy in a couple weeks' time, and they're good. They're tough.
Yeah, they are tough. And Mark mentioned the balance. That's kind of what stood out to me the most. I think they're on the same side of the bracket as South Dakota State. They can meet in a semifinal matchup potentially. I know I'm looking down the road a little bit. I feel like their formula, you got to styles make fights, and you're not going to beat South Dakota State running the football and being physical. You got to have a little pizzazz. You got to be able to throw the ball. McCoy can do that. They're tough, but I do think they're built to compete with a team like that where you can't be one-dimensional against a top-tier team, and we know Idaho's not that. They have so many weapons. So if Woods is healthy, Hatton's healthy, and McCoy's on the field, they got a chance versus anybody. Talked about Montana quite a bit this show. Just won the Brawl of the Wild. If they're going to face the winner of Delaware and Lafayette, how far do you guys think the Griz could go? We'll keep it short and sweet. Not too much build-up. They just won the Big Sky Championship. They're rolling right now. But do you guys think that carries over, and how do you see it going? Let's start with you, Ian, and then we'll go around.
Man, we've come a long way since talking about that loss to Northern Arizona earlier this year. I think this is a team that's poised to go on a deep playoff run. I would not shock me at all if they're in the finals, semifinals, anything like that. Get a big win over your rival at home. Get the juices flowing as you go into the playoffs. They've already beat 2 other playoff teams in Big Sky play with that win over Idaho and Sacramento State a couple weeks ago. I think this is a team that's poised to go on a pretty deep playoff run.
Yeah, they set themselves up in a good position. Tough side of the bracket, but they're rolling right now. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I think they're a little bit like Idaho, where they have a quarterback who can throw it, and they got a couple good running backs, a couple good receivers, so they're not pigeonholed into one way of trying to win a game. Plus, their defense is really good and has gotten better through the season. So, yeah, they're kind of poised to make a long run.
Yeah, they are, and it's really going to come down to matchups. I'll get to that more in a second, but how about you, Fritz, your outlook for the Griz? And I gave Fritz credit the other day. I texted him. I said, you stuck with the Griz when they were down. I was kind of thinking the season was over. He's like, no, we've seen this before. Give it a little time, and here we are. So they're rolling at the right time.
I don't remember being that confident.
Maybe it wasn't that. Maybe I'm putting a little spin on it.
but I do remember in 2008 they lost their conference opener like they did this year. And then by the end of the year, they were nailed. And this is probably the 2008, as far as the team I covered, was my favorite one because they weren't expected to be very good. And I think the expectations were pretty low. Well, the coach expected them for 6. So, and then when they lose to NU, you're thinking, well, that's 6 losses in their last 12. It's Bobby Houck's 6th season back. So it was going to happen. It should have happened by now. But then a couple days later, I thought, they have a clunker every year. So now they're back where they were in like 2004 and 2008. And I think they can pull it off. I think they can get to Frisco. And mainly, the main thing I like is their defense. They just don't miss tackles. Riley Allen's so fast. They've got speed at the right spots. They've got Governor taking on 2 or 3 tacklers and then closing so fast on people. I just think they're on a tear. It's going to keep going for a while.
Yeah, and we mentioned this before, talking a little bit, but they have so much depth on defense. They keep guys fresh for the most part. They have a lot of guys they rotate in. Like you said, they don't miss many tackles. They hover around the football. So that's a formula to win. I agree. I think Montana's built for a deep playoff run. They're a tough team. They win gritty football games. I think the biggest thing standing in their way is you're just not going to be able to miss a beat with their potential schedule. That first game, Delaware, Lafayette, they should take care of business. After that, you're looking at some tough foes. You have South Dakota. Coyotes had a good year. They're on their side of the bracket. North Dakota State and Montana State. You got to think one of them could be coming to Washington Grizzly for a semifinal game, that would be crazy. So I think the biggest thing for the Grizz is just week in and week out, they're going to be tested. They landed on a pretty tough side of the bracket. I know everyone in the playoffs can play, but this time of year, certain teams, certain programs tend to step up. And Montana State, North Dakota State, those are two that if you're going to have to play them to get to the championship, you're really going to earn it. But like you guys kind of all said, they have the formula. They have the defense. It's just a matter of proving it week in and week out. So it's going to be tough, but that'll be fun to watch for sure for Big Sky football fans down the stretch. We're going to see a lot of good playoff football, it's looking like. So last thing for the week, just wanted to get a quick prediction for Sac State's first-round playoff matchup. They're the only Big Sky team in action this week. They'll be playing the North Dakota Fighting Hawks. Winner plays the 3 seed South Dakota. So that's going to be a tough one. Mark, how about your thoughts on the Hornets? And we'll just go around and then wrap this thing up.
Okay. Well, you asked for a quick one. I'll say, no, they'll lose. They'll be done.
Yeah, that's it. Short and sweet. See you later, Hornets. No, how about you, Fritz?
Oh, you know what? I'll pick the Hornets just because Andy Thompson is a good coach and a good defensive mind, and I don't want to root against him. I feel like I've kind of like been hard on him the last couple of days, so go Hornets.
Yeah, there we go. How about you, Ian?
Yeah, I mean, it's a matchup on the road against a tough North Dakota team with wins over North Dakota State and a close loss to South Dakota. They're also 6-0 at home. That's a pretty big factor. I don't see them pulling it out, but hey, I'd love to be surprised.
Right, that's where I'm at.
Teams making deep playoff runs.
I'm right there with you. It's like I want them to win this one, but that 6-0 home record, I saw that as well, and that jumped out at me. Playoff game, I believe it's in a dome, so it could get a little funky. And, hey, I do have some family who's Fighting Hawk alumni, so I'll give them a shout-out and go with the Fighting Hawks this time. So little North Dakota roots, had to throw it out there. But, yeah, no, best-case scenario, Sac State got to get a lead early on the road and run with it because they have the rushing attack, but can't make those turnovers and mistakes. But, no, great stuff, guys. It's crazy. It's already the end of the season. It's playoff time. We're looking at a exciting playoffs. Kind of got a slow weekend coming up, and then after that, it's going to be a real exciting one with Idaho, Montana, and Montana State all back in action. Possibly have a big-time matchup with the Bison and Montana State to look forward to. So it's really going to play itself out. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you guys, as always, for taking the time to do this, and thanks to everybody watching at home. It's been a fun one.